All right, so today we're going to be making this on Fusion 360. This is the base of the lamp. It has one piece of wood on the bottom, and then it has, which is a horizontal piece of wood. Then we have a vertical piece of wood at the top. These are two separate pieces of wood, as you can see by the rings that have been drawn onto it. These are two separate pieces of wood. We're then also going to make this aluminium right angle piece over here with screws that are going into the piece, and we can hide our screws and our piece of aluminium, and we already have the holes over here, so we can export this later into a 2D drawing, like an orthographic projection, and then we can use that as a template to find out where we're going to drill our holes in our pieces of wood. So we're going to do that. We're also going to use commands like copying to speed up our time, and then adding appearances, and if we have time to do a rendering, but that's the low priority for today. So to do this tutorial, we're going to start something new. We're going to go do a new design. We're going to do the base of our lamp. We're going to go to create. We will look at from our top view. Now that we're in this view, we're going to do the line tool. We will start from the origin. We're going to go up 75 millimeters. And then we'll go across 150. And then we will go down another 75. And then we will close off this square. And now as we close off this square, we know this is a closed surface because everything is blue. We will then get a line anywhere on this top line, just make it around the top right-hand corner. As you can see, as your mouse hovers over to the line, you get the blue X, which means it's trying to attach to that line. So let's pick this point over here. And all I care about this, actually, I'm just going to make this line pretty random over here, and then press enter. So now I have that random blue line over there. We're going to use the sketch dimension tool to actually define that line, and then we can adjust that later to visibly see how we want our piece to look like. Oh, and we are only doing half of the base right now, and then we're going to mirror it so we can do the other half later. So let's go and use our sketch dimension. We want to we care about this length over here. All right, so it's going to be like the front part. If you look at our other sketch over here, that's going to be equivalent to this front part over here, how wide that is. And so we have that sketch there. And then we care about this angle. So we're going to go sketch dimensions again. If we press this line and this line, it's going to automatically think, what type of angle do you want? So let's just pick 45. 45. And this over here, if we double click this length, we can change it to 25. And then we have defined that part of the sketch. You can also drag these things out if you don't like their location in your drawing. You can just click them and, can you click and drag them? No, okay. I think you can only move sketch dimensions. You can't move ones that are previously drawn. So now that we have this shape, we're going to mirror this image. So we'll go to the mirror option over here. Mirror. We want to select this side and this side and this and this. Where is my mirroring tool? Oh, sorry, I'm not in mirror. My bad. Mirror. Okay, now I have the mirror selected. The objects I want to mirror this and this and this and this. Those are the 4 lines I want to copy. The line I want to reflect it is this bottom line over here, so it flips our lamp over like that. And if I press OK, we now have 2 halves of the lamp. So we can finish this sketch now. We can go to finish. Let's look in the 3D space. Okay, we have a lamp. As I look at this, this looks a bit too chunky for my liking. All right, so what I'm going to do is I actually want to make the overall width a bit thinner. So I'm going to go to sketches over here, and I can go and right click. Is it going to let me right click? If I right click the sketch, I'm going to say edit sketch, so it should load itself back up. What happened? Did we lose it? Right click, edit sketch. Okay, there we go. So in this sketch over here, I want to actually change this length over here. I think 75, which is 150, is, well actually, this width over here is 150 is okay, but it's still too chunky. So what I'm going to do instead, this length over here, the top one, instead of being 150, I'll make this 20 centimeters. Enter. And because I've already defined these other shapes, everything else moves along with it. And so then I can press finish sketch. And this is an advantage of doing the mirror. The other side has already copied it. So now I have this base of the sketch over here. I'm going to go extrude. I will select this shape and this shape, noticing I'm not picking the corners. And then I'm going to make it the standard thickness of 20 millimeters, because in our workshop we have 20 millimeter thick piece of wood. So it's easier just to make the thing that thickness. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to do the side, we're going to do the top piece, this one over here. So we will go and we will sketch this plane over here. We will, again, we're just going to pick some random lines. Hold on. I'm going to press snap to grid because I don't think I'm snapping. Much better. So I'm just going to pick some random looking lines. Cool. And I just randomize these. So now I'm going to actually get some actual values I care about. So I can get an angle there. Let's say I really want this to be 60 degrees. And then let's say I really want this height over here to be 60 centimeters, sorry, 6 millimeters, sorry, 6 centimeters. And then I want this distance. See, it's lifted itself up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this base and this. Distance between these will be 20, which should move the whole thing down. And the distance between this dot and this dot, that should also be 20. So I'm just forcing it into that corner. And then the last dimension that we need is this one over here at the top. Let's say I want there to be a 3 centimeter part at the top. So that's the general shape I have. Press enter. Finish the sketch. Go to the home screen. I'm going to make this part a bit thick now. I'm going to do 10 millimeters, but I'm going to do it both sides. So I can either do 2 sides if I want it to be, like a different thickness on each side. But in this case, I'm okay for it to be symmetric. It's going to be 10 millimeters on both sides. By default, it wants to join these into one object, which is fine for our basic sketches. But now that we want to get a rendering out and we want to use different pieces of wood, we're going to make different materials. So we're going to make it a new body. And we press OK. So now we should have 2 bodies in our sketch, and we can hide them. We can say that's one body and that's another body. What do we have to do next? So, and I can show you how to add the materials into these bodies. If we right click this body and we go to appearance, once our appearance tab loads up, we'll look at some wood. If we want to pick the solid wood, because it's going to have that good end grain. Let's say we have some finished wood. We did walnut last time, so let's pick something pine, which I believe the wood we have in the workshop is pine. So if we make this pine. Oh, nice. So now we have pine wood. And from what I've gathered Fusion 360 will by default make the thinnest side to be the end grain. So the thinnest side of the wood is where you're going to get those rings. The largest and longest side, it's going to go with the grain, which is usually how you would be using the wood. The difference is if you're making something out of a solid block, you can get different patterns, but for most of the wood that we're using, it's going to be pieces like this. All right, we can close. Next thing we're going to do, so let's hide these two parts. We are going to be making the right angled piece of aluminium that we're going to put our screws in to support our walls. And we're going to show ours in this case because we want an industrial looking lamp, let's say. So we'll click this view over here. We're just going to make a very simple L shape. All right, we have a very simple L shape over there, and we're going to get some dimensions. We're going to get this dimension, and we're going to get enter, and we're going to get this dimension, and this dimension is going to equal So what I just did there, I was just testing if that works. Okay, so I have these two dimensions over here. This is a solid, it's a flat piece of aluminium and then it's bent into a machine and it's right angle. So it should have a constant thickness. What you can do is, you have these two dimensions over here. Right now they're both 20 millimeters, but let's just say this one is, can't change that. Let's say I make a, let's say they're clearly not equal in length, right? You can, instead of writing in your dimensions, you can write in, let's say I'm going to make it 2 millimeter thick aluminium. I can write 2 and 2 and it can make it. But you can also make a dimension dependent on another dimension. So we already have, what did I do there? Right, so we have this dimension over here, which is 56. With this dimension over here is 20. Right, what we can do is we can make this dimension, let's say this is 2 millimeters, because that part of the thickness is 2 millimeters. And this one over here, we can write 2 millimeters in here, or we can click this dimension over here. And notice how it says that? It says D15. So that means in our model, it's saving all our dimensions somewhere in a document. And this over here is the 15th dimension that it has listed down. So that's why we have D15. And we also see over there that it has FX. So that means it's using a formula. So you can, when we showed in previous tutorials how in your distances you can type in 10 times 2 and it'll come out as 20. You can also do things like D15 times 2. So if you want one side of the object to be twice as thick as the other side. This is really good when you want to do like relative shapes. Or if you are getting, let's say you're getting like a piece of plywood that you know is 20 millimeters thick, and at one part you're stacking up two pieces on top of each other, you know it's going to be twice as thick there. But then let's say instead of getting 20 millimeter plywood, you get 15 millimeter plywood, it's going to be 30 because it's going to be 15 times 2. If we press enter, this dimension, fx, this dimension over here is copying this dimension over here. And just to prove that, if we go over there, if we actually change to 5, both sides will change. This is like one of the stronger tools you get in Fusion 360. It allows your whole job to change. You can even use dimensions that are in other sketches. The only difficulty is you have to like unhide them and find the dimension you want. But you can allow your objects to be seen through other members. All right, we have this, and then let's do the same thing with the length. We have this length over here is 100, but we want it to be 20, and we want this length over here to be the same length, and so we're going to do that. So now we have that. That's the profile of our piece of aluminium. We can press finish sketch. Let's go and let's extrude it. We want this piece to be 10 millimeters thick. So 1 centimeter. And there we have our right angled piece of aluminium. And we can, appearance, we can make it aluminium. No, not steel. No, it doesn't want that? Okay. All right. Our thing is aluminium. Next thing we have, our piece is hidden inside because we made our piece of aluminium inside the origin. So what we can do is we're going to use a tool to change the location of that piece of aluminium. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to modify and we're going to use the align tool. So the align tool just moves a piece of geometry based on what you want to align it with. So let's go press the align tool. It should load up. We want to so this part over here, we want to move this face over here. Notice how when I bring my mouse onto the align tool and the object, you have a bunch of different locations where you can attach to. So whichever one you want to align. Let's say I want the very center of my piece to align from. So that's what we're aligning the base, and we want to align it to, if we bring this over here and bring this down, we want to align it to this over here. And so now it's moved it up. So it's moved it with that surface. Then the next thing we're going to do, we are going to align this face to the face of the piece of wood we have there. Function, we're going to align. We want to align this face to this one over here. Okay. And then, so what we've done there, we also want to align these. Actually, I'll leave this for now. So what we've done there is we've used the align tool instead of manually moving it, because what that allows, let's say our piece of wood, we actually needed to use a piece of wood that was 15 millimeters thick instead of 20. If I right click and say edit this feature under this extrusion that went out 20 millimeters, instead I can change it to 15. All right. Notice the difference between these two objects over here. One of them has followed the piece of wood down, and one of them has not. This piece of aluminium that we made, because we aligned it, it's going to follow that surface as it changes. But this top vertical piece of the stand is not connected by an alignment, so it's not going to follow the thickness of the material. So we can actually we'll add another alignment feature, so we can do that. We will go and go modify, we're going to add an align, we'll pick this, where are you? Show me. We're going to pick that shape, and then we will pick this shape. So now it's going to follow. Now it's following the height, so we can change our thickness. Let's just go back to our original extrusion and get back, because I want it to be 20 millimeters. So let's go back to 20. All right, and everything follows. Now we have to do a depth here, so we're going to manually move this part over. Similar to our align, as we hover our mouse over to the object, it has all different areas that it's trying to attach to. That's just to do your frame of reference. When it comes to the Cartesian coordinates, x, y, z, it doesn't really matter. But where it does matter is when you start to do rotation, because where you put your mouse, the point you pick as the center of rotation is going to change. For example, if I'm rotating around this, if I start rotating around this part over here, all right, the object's going to be different than if I were to rotate around this part over here. Right, it's going to rotate differently. But we only care about moving in the X and Y, so we can select this body over here, and then our distance. We can just pick a distance that makes sense. Let's just say we're 20 millimeters in. Okay, cool. Done. Now we are going to draw some screws and then drill some holes in so we can see where those screws are going to be. These screws, let's go and hide our, actually I'm going to show, I just want this part to be shown. I'm going to go create a sketch. I'm going to create a sketch. Actually, before I make a sketch, I'm going to press construct. I'm going to press midplane, and I want there to be a midplane. I want there to be a midplane in the middle of my piece of aluminium. Then I'm going to go create a sketch using that midplane, and then I'm just going to pick the midpoint. Which is about over here. 7 millimeter screws, 45 degrees. Let's go over up into here. Let's go 45 degrees again. Okay, that. So what I drew there is the side profile of the screw. And then, well, like, yeah, a side profile of half the screw. I'm then going to press the revolve tool. This one over here. Press that surface we just had. The axis is the original axis that it revolved around, and so it's going to go and make a 3D version of that screw. Now, by default it's going to cut because it has determined there's an object inside another object. Instead we want to make a new body, and if I hide a piece of aluminium, that's the screw that we've made. All right, so let's press OK. So now we have a new screw. And I'm going to enable this one because it's going to be confusing. This will be screw. All right. So we have the screw here. Now we need to make a copy of this screw up here. So we could draw it again, but that's really time consuming. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to press the move and copy button, which is this one over here. We're going to select the screw. And if you just select the body in here, it's going to do it at the center of what it determines is the center of mass, or the center of the body. For the most time, it's fine for us. Actually, for this case, instead of doing it at the center of the body, let's do the face. All right. So we are going to press this button down here, create a copy. So when we move, we can move our screw and we can change its angle. We can change its height. Does that look about right? No, a bit more down. I just want it to look the same as that. So now we create a copy, and as we did that, we could rotate it. And so now we have two screws in here. We press OK. So as we created a copy, it's already labeled it screw 1. Next thing we're going to do, if we remove the screws, we see the aluminium still doesn't have any holes in it. So we're going to use a tool called combine. Now the confusing thing with combine is it's not actually adding two things together. When it says the word combine, it means use this geometry and do something with it with another geometry. So we can actually make one geometry, subtract from another geometry in the combine tool. So we press combine. We want this piece of aluminium to be our main body. Then the tools we're going to pick are what other geometry affects that main body we selected. So what piece of geometry affects that right angle piece of aluminium? And it's going to be the two screws. So if we press screw 1 and screw 2, these two pieces are going to be affecting it. By default, it's going to say join. So if we look at this side over here, we see these screws are now connected. But we instead want to press cut. So it's going to cut a hole in that object. By default, when you do a combine, it is going to remove all your tools. But we want to keep our tools. because we want to use our screws, we want our screws to remain as objects in here. So we want to say over here, keep the tools. And then when we press OK, we should now have screw 1, screw 2. So if I hide this, we still have our 2 screws. And if I hide our screws, we have our nice chamfer cut in our piece of aluminium. Let's do that same thing with the bodies. So we'll go over here. We want to press combine. We'll press this. Actually, before we do that, we want to copy this to be on the other side of our object. So what we're going to on the other side of our vertical wall here. So we're going to press move and copy. We can actually select. Let's select 1, 2, 3. So we have 3 things now. We will create a copy. We will move it from point to point. No, we won't. We'll just move it manually. So we're going to change over here to 180 degrees, and then we will move it over here so it lines up that way, and then we'll move it this way until we visually see that it lines up. We did this, and then we'll go to this view. Yep, everything's all good. And then we press OK. And so now the notation gets a bit weird over here because we have screw 1, screw 2, then we have screw on 1 and screw on 1, 1. So at some point you might want to name these something different. Then we want to make our holes in our wood, because if we hide all our screws and see how there's no holes over there? So what we are going to do, we will combine this base plate. The bodies that we want to cut it by is this screw and this screw. And we want to keep our tools. So now let's just inspect to make sure that's how we actually turned out. Yep, we have holes down here. And we want to do the same with this top piece now. We want to press combine. We're going to press this. We want to get rid of it by that tool and that tool. Okay. Now, before we finish, we want to, these screws, we want to make them into a new material. We want to make them into brass so they look nice. Physical appearance. Apparently, no. Let's say I'm going to make it brass. So I'm going to click and drag. Hold on, why aren't you working? Okay. I want that screw to be brass. I want that screw to be brass. I want that screw to be brass. Right, so I think now I've highlighted all of them. All our screws are brass. And I believe if we hide everything over here, we can see that now we have these dots over here. So when we get our drawing in our 2D, we can see the location of these screw holes, which is going to assist us making this body in real life. Just before we finish, let's say our job. This is a lot of sharp edges. So let's say we want to go over these sharp edges with a bit of sandpaper. Under our modify, we have the object of fillet or chamfer, where fillet is doing like a curved edge, and chamfer is doing a 45-degree angle. Let's say we want to do it all fillet. Press the fillet button, then we press a surface. So let's press this surface over here, and now let's pick a thickness that we want. Let's say we want it to be 3 millimeters. Or even more. Let's go 5. So we made 5 millimeters for our chamfer, and we do a nice surface. But let's, how do I turn this one off? So we can, yes. All right, so we can just press the whole face. So if we press this whole face over here, we can fillet it. Let's say we want 5mm of filleting. We press OK, and we look at the image. That's what it's going to come out as. Right? We have nice smooth surfaces all around our lamp. It looks great. The issue we have is with our lamp, let's say we don't want the back to be filleted because you're going to get this a bad piece of geometry here. So when we were doing our filleting command, edit feature, instead of picking the whole face, let's instead pick just the lines we want. We want this line, and then we want this line, and this line, and this line, and this line. So we don't want the back selected, and we want this again to be 5mm. And then we press OK. And now we have a nice smooth filleted edge. And this top part, let's say instead of a filleting, we want this to be a chamfer. So we'll press the chamfer tool, and let's say we want this and this and, oh no, not that. We want this line and this line and this line. We want these 3 lines, and we want these to be 5mm chamfer.
That seems a bit much.
Yeah, let's go a bit smaller. Let's go 1mm. Yeah, that's it. That's like a nice bit of sandpaper. Right. So there's no sharp edges on our thing at all now. And then we can render this in the 3D to see how good it looks. Let's save our design. This will be V3. That's the 3rd tutorial that we've done of this. Save. We'll go to, once it saves, we will go to render. This over here, do we have an environment? If we go to setup over here, we can choose our environment. Lights, let's do crossroads. Yeah. Yeah, our thing's on the middle of the road now. That looks kind of nice. All right, so we have our thing. We view it in to get a nice view. Then we go to the render option over here. Now, if you're rendering on your laptops, please have it plugged into a PowerPoint, and please don't have anything underneath it because you will overheat your laptop. If you have a full student account, you might be able to cloud render. Otherwise, you're just going to do local rendering. Local rendering, this stuff makes sense. Final, let's say render. This is a very simple drawing, so it's not going to take like longer than a minute. But once you start getting a complicated lamp, like if you have a tree with 30 different branches coming out with lights attached, it's going to take longer for you to do your rendering. So put that into account. Do your rendering, and then, I don't know, what do you kids do? Go have a hot chocolate or something.
No. Thanks for recognizing my favorite fruit stuff.
No problem. All right, let's have a look at this rendering, and oh, nice. Plywood is notice the I like the imaging that it has when you do the 3D wood. You get that nice grain structure. So it really shows you what our current piece of wood is. Now, can I zoom in on this, or is it not even going to let me zoom in? Let's say if I just get a real, let me get a real zoom in over here, and I'll do another render. I want to really get that brass. I believe when you press the render button, when you actually click the thing, it says how long it's going to take to render. And as it's rendering, it's doing that real-time ray tracing technology to improve its visual. All right, so that rendering took a bit more because it has like reflections in it. But here we can see here in this rendering, we have the aluminium is reflecting off itself. And then when you have that image and you like it, you can press the download button over here and download that image into a PNG file, which you can add into your reports or whatever. Do not get the screen pick. You're going to lose all that lovely quality that you have made. So just save it and use that PNG file. All right.